Good morning. If we could start to find our way. I'm Libby Baum. I'm one of the co-chairs of the Adult Ag Committee, and I'm going to open us in prayer this morning before I introduce our speaker. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, thank you. Thank you for this place that takes the time to embrace something so important as our mental health, something we all struggle with, and some of us tend to better than others, and we know that. We're grateful for those who work in this area and do the important work of helping us grow and share and learn and find our way forward. Lord, we're grateful for this church, for everyone in it. We're grateful for Meg, who's sharing her time with us this morning. Bless our time together. In your son's name we pray. Amen. John's going to introduce our speaker this morning.
Good morning. My name is John Baum. I'm an English teacher at Holy Innocents Episcopal School, where Meg is also a counselor. And basically her bio is she's a licensed clinical social worker specializing in adolescent and teen mental health. She works as a full-time social emotional counselor in a high school, Holy Innocents, and part-time as a clinician with Hopeology Wellness. Meg has a front row seat to the trials, challenges, and trends occurring in the lives of teens. She utilizes, and I asked her about these acronyms, but I'm not going to try to say them all. In the methods of DBT, CBT, and then narrative therapy and solution-focused approaches to help clients find practical and effective ways to create sustainable changes in their lives. And I can tell you from personal experience that she knows what she speaks, and she's very good at it. She's been at Holy Innocents 4 years, and I can point to several students who have thrived because of their 4-year relationship with Meg and the work that she has done with them. So help me welcome Ms. Meg Kraner.
Thank you. Thank you. All righty. How's my audio? Does this sound okay, everybody? Yes. Okay, great. Well, good morning, everyone. As Libby and John mentioned, my name is Meg Kraner. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and as he referenced, that between my roles as a full-time school counselor in a high school and a part-time private practice therapist, I spend about 82% of my waking hours with or around teenagers. Now, I know for some of you that may sound intimidating, and for some days for me too it is. But it really is such a joy and a privilege and an honor to be welcomed into the village of a family and into the village of somebody's life, because we all know it takes a village to raise a child. And it is very insightful to be in those vulnerable spaces and conversations and be able to have a peek into what it's like to be a teenager in today's world. Now, my assumption is many of you are in this room because there's a teenager in your life that you're looking to build a deeper connection with. And so throughout my years of conversations with teens and families, I have seen some patterns and themes and common threads develop. And my goal is that when sharing these today, you can utilize those topics as ways to build that deeper connection with those teenagers in your life. So without further ado, let's get started. So I want to start with a bit of history, because we all know that history repeats itself. So in the 13th century in Italy, we see the invention of eyeglasses, spectacles. Stay with me here. So from the 15th to 19th century, we see the invention of the printing press. We see advancements to modern medicine and increase in literacy rates across the world. Of course, first starting in the wealthier classes and eventually trickling into the more layman and working classes. But despite their prevalence for hundreds and hundreds of years, by 1971, only 5% of the US population ages 12 to 65 are recorded as wearing prescription eyeglasses for nearsightedness, the most common ophthalmological diagnosis. By 2004, we see that number jump to 42%, and by 2019, 64%. So, how is it that these had been around for hundreds and hundreds of years, being used among different populations, but by 1971, Only 5% of our population is wearing glasses for the most common diagnosis. How is it that within this barely 50-year span from 1971 to 2019, we see this massive influx of individuals wearing eyeglasses for nearsightedness? That's only 50 years there, and we have hundreds of years prior. What happened? It can be easy to assume that people must be faking it, that they want some cute accessory, a quirky personality trait, or maybe they want some type of access to an accommodation in life, like a large print bulletin as they come into church. But that would be a little silly to assume. What we actually know is that data shows us some major influences that happened in this 50-year span to cause such a great increase in the use of eyeglasses. First, there's a major influx in kind of the last wave of women entering the workforce into higher numbers, of a large majority of individuals who are now benefiting from the use of eyeglasses. We see employers are providing greater healthcare benefits to their workers, to their employees, and so individuals are being able to receive vision care, ophthalmology care, at higher rates. We also see some major societal and environmental factors. So in the environmental factor, we know that fluorescent lighting, which is the most common lighting used in office-type jobs, which is the most common workplace, it actually damages the natural development of our eyes. And therefore, because we don't have as much exposure to sunlight, natural light, our eyes are developing in a different way than they ever did hundreds of years ago. And the last, most impactful, and probably most obvious culprit of why we see this 50-year jump and this big increase in eyeglass wear is because screens. TVs, computers, phones are integrated into our life in a higher number than ever before, and our eyes are being exposed to something that they were not naturally designed to endure. So, just as silly as it would be to assume that this 50-year time span and this big jump in eyeglass wear is because people are faking it, it's just as silly to assume that when it comes to teen mental health. But we do it all the time. We say teens nowadays have XYZ diagnosis at greater rates. They do. They absolutely do. But it does not mean that it's illegitimate. So right now, about 1 in 7 of our teens, so approximately ages 12 to 19, are living with a diagnosed mental illness. Keep that in mind. Just as this number here only relates to prescription eyeglasses. This doesn't account for the people like my mom who would buy cheater readers at the checkout of the grocery store just to kind of help get through the day. There's plenty of people that are living with mental health symptoms that they are learning to manage independently without a diagnosis. So we do see a greater number of teens living with mental health diagnoses. What we've seen and what we know, there's some key environmental, societal, and cultural shifts that brought on this higher rate of diagnostics. First being earlier detection and earlier intervention. Just as the influx of higher healthcare benefits helped people get glasses, influx of higher access to mental health care also has caused that change for our teens. We see teens these days receiving more mental health diagnoses and more mental health care because parents these days are thankfully embracing that and allowing for their teens and their individuals to receive care that they so greatly benefit from. Other environmental and societal shifts that we know have impacted this diagnostic rate is, of course, our best friend, the internet. So we have high influx of immeasurable, immense amount of information that our bodies and our brains are being exposed to constantly. We know what is happening at any area of the world at any point in time on this global lens, on this global scape. Our bodies are designed to respond. I'll get into that in a little bit. But when we are seeing these global tragedies, these news stories, these catchy headlines, day after day after day, we see an influx of overactive nervous systems, as seen with anxiety, and underactive nervous systems, or desensitized nervous systems, as happens with depression. So teens, even 10, 15, 20 years ago, had a much different life than our teens right now. They have a much different environment. And just as our eyes were not developed, or not created to develop and respond to fluorescent lighting as they do to natural lighting, our brains were not developed to respond to the information that we are able to receive nowadays. So we want to keep that in mind as we kind of move forward into some of the things, because there are shifts, and I'm very grateful that there are shifts, and I hope that you are too. But with all change, there comes discomfort. So the next thing teens want us to know, or maybe a little bit more selfishly what I want you to know, is when I'm working with a teen in a family where lying is a habit, it is important to remember that lying is a learned behavior. More than that, it is a social and environmental and evolutionary instinct. It's a survival skill. We as humans are some of the most apex predators on this planet. We are designed to protect ourselves. Also, some contrary information, we as humans are also social beings. We are designed to protect our relationships. Protecting ourselves and protecting our relationships are two things that often come in conflict with each other. This is where lying typically occurs. That in the past, what I see with individuals is that if in the past there is an attempt at honesty, vulnerability that is not met with emotional safety or perceived emotional safety, or sometimes not met with physical safety, we are going to resort to lying because we are going to resort to protecting ourselves. We may also resort to methods of being able to protect the relationship that is at stake. We as adults are not immune to this concept. We often tailor our responses, actions, words, and behaviors to receive a specific response from another individual. When our boss asks how that presentation is going that we definitely haven't started, we're gonna say, it's going great, we're just chipping away at it, because we don't wanna damage the relationship between us and that boss. We don't wanna damage the perspective that they have of us. And maybe we're afraid of some emotional vulnerability or fear that they are gonna respond negatively, and we won't know how to handle that. So we do a little lie, we do a little fib. Maybe when we do school shopping with the kid, we come home and we say, don't tell parent XYZ what we just spent on those shoes today. We integrate little lies and fibs into our life as adults all the time. So it's natural to understand why teens do it too, especially when they have an underdeveloped brain and underdeveloped nervous system, that if we, as the grown individual, are doing this daily, of course they're gonna do it too. So the second thing to keep in mind that teens want us to know, third, is that social escapes matter. So we are relational beings, we are social beings. It takes a village, which is very true. This is how we have survived centuries of time, is by being together and being in community. We know that adolescence is the time for branching out of the home and into the world and embracing new perspectives and opportunities, new thought processes. And we know that individuals that have a lack of social belonging have it has a negative impact on their development. We know that kids who had healthy social relationships and strong social supports grow up to be the adults with happier life, with happier relationships. They have more success in their life, and they also have more longevity. We know that happiness and social belonging are connected to being able to live longer and being a more well-adjusted adult. So when our kid comes home and is telling us about some drama that occurred, that is like, to y'all, probably not the most important thing in your day, because we have other things that we're thinking about. But to them, that is their world, and it is the most important thing for them. When we use messages like this of don't worry about what your friends say, or just high school, it's not the real world, we are often doing that in an attempt to console the individual, to help them minimize the stress and distress that they are feeling. But we inadvertently end up sending three very distinct messages to our kids. First, we teach them that they are doing life wrong, that because they value their peers and the social relationships that are happening in their life, that they are doing things wrong, when in actuality, we know they're doing it exactly correct. We send the second message that this phase of their life, that the teenage phase of life, is not important enough, that it's not the same as being an adult, when in reality, we know that the vast majority of adult mental health problems are directly linked to childhood and the development of your adolescence. So this phase of life is incredibly important, and they should be valuing that. When we say these type of things, the third message that we send, which is the most difficult and the most opposite of what we hope, we send the message that we as the adult are incapable of understanding the world from their perspective, leaving that teen feeling very alone, and very isolated and creating a vast amount of distance between us and them, which damages exactly what we're hoping for. We want that connection. We want them to come to us. But when we use this type of language, we're doing the opposite. We as adults can imagine this pretty easily. So I mentioned that presentation at work. Let's say you go to give the presentation and you kind of botch it. And you're noticing all of your coworkers are making faces and snickering, and maybe there's a joke that happens in the break room. Your boss blatantly says that they're disappointed in you. You go home and you tell your family about that. And you're upset, you're embarrassed, you're hurt, you're frustrated. And your teenager says to you, don't worry about what your coworkers think. Their opinion doesn't matter. Don't worry about what your boss thinks. Their opinion doesn't matter. Don't worry about your job. That's not the real world. We would be pissed. We'd say, what the heck? This is something I've worked very hard on. I'm allowed to be embarrassed. I'm allowed to be frustrated. This is my social landscape, and we know that social belonging and social functioning directly correlates to adult success. We want to be successful in those relationships. That would be incredibly dismissive for these type of comments to come from their mouth to our situation as it is on the other way around. This one's a tough one. And I want to also say that I'm going to start with the negatives, but we're going to get to the positives. So when your teen is dealing with some type of social situation, some type of stressor, drama, whatever it may be, adults don't and can't always make things better. Now, there is a very vital difference, and there is a very important time when adults do need to step in, even against a child's will. If there is a threat to somebody's physical safety, if there is a concern of suicide, eating disorders, self-harm, those type of situations, adults absolutely will and should step in. But about 90% of the time, adult involvement into a child's situation does not help the problem, and it does not help the child. What it does is it sends the message that they are incapable of handling things, that the adult must do it for them, which damages their confidence as they go into new situations and are trying to make good decisions. It puts them at risk for peer retaliation, which we know social scapes matter. We are taking away a very vital part of their development by stepping in and damaging those peer relationships. Puts them at risk of exacerbating the issue, especially around the time of the holidays, when maybe a kid is going through a friend breakup or a relationship breakup, and they sit down at the dinner table and Aunt Sue says, I heard you got dumped last week. That's so unnecessary because now we're exacerbating the issue. All the kid wanted to do is sit down and just have a plate of Thanksgiving food, and now we're talking about a deeply personal topic to a large audience that they weren't prepared for. Or when a teacher knows, that maybe a conflict happened between peers, and then they, without consent, change around the seating chart to try to mediate the problem instead of just letting the two people be next to each other and figure it out. We are creating embarrassment for them. It robs them of their independence for coping skills and distress tolerance. We as adults know that life is tough, it sucks sometimes, and we have to learn how to be okay with that. We need to learn how to push through and still get up the next day and do the things that we are required to do. And when we step in and we don't allow for our kids to develop those skills of how to be in distress and still be okay, it takes away that very crucial adulthood skill. It also results in their inability for conflict resolution. These kids that are the ones that are receiving too much adult intervention into their lives are the ones that grow up to be the coworkers that we don't want on our group project, because we know they can't take feedback, and if we have any little concern that they're going to push back, we don't want to get on their bad side because we know it's just going to get inflamed and turn into some type of big drama that we don't want to deal with. They are incapable of handling conflict. And it adds a layer of emotional management that is not needed for that child. They are working through a growing and developing nervous system, a growing and developing brain. They do not need to be managing anybody else's as well. Yeah. Okay, please hold. We're good? Do we hold up? Okay. Alrighty, so how can we make things better? Ooh, got a little off center on that. So I want to make it clear that there's a very important role that adults play in a child's life, and you can make things better when we walk alongside them instead of in front of them. when we value curiosity over judgment. So instead of leading with, why did you do that? Leading with, I'm curious how that played out. How did you feel about that when you walked away? Were you proud of the words you used? How did you feel about it at that point in time versus how you feel about it now? What might you do differently? When we lead with curiosity, we can instill critical thinking skills into their social relationships that maybe their peers don't have yet, that maybe they too can kind of domino effect teach to other people. And ideally, that's the critical thinking skills that we want them to have later in life versus a constant internal monologue of judgment instead of a constant internal monologue of, why did I do that? Why did I do that? Why did I do that? We can at least think about it as, next time I'm gonna do X, Y, Z. When we value our relationship with them over the rules, asterisks again, because yes, there are very, very important times where rules must and should be upheld, again, even if it's gonna cause conflict. However, we still want to be preserving of the relationship above those rules. We want that message to be sent that our relationship with this individual matters the most, not just what the rules say. When we value listening over fixing, we are helping them throughout this situation in the best way possible. We want our children to grow up into successful adults, and this is a key way of being able to help that. Instead of jumping to the solution, which I'm sure we would hate on the opposite end. With that presentation we gave, we wouldn't want our teen to say, well, Mom, why didn't you just do this? Why didn't you just try that? Why didn't you just do some little deep breathing? We're gonna be like, thanks, but that was 6 hours ago and I don't need that advice right now. Like, we're past that situation. We don't need to jump in with fixing. We need to be there with listening. And lastly, this is the one that by and large comes up the most in my conversations with teens. They see and hear the way that their adults in their life talk about them. They see and hear their adults in their life saying, my kids come before anything, I would do anything for my kids. But when it comes to valuing their feelings over your feelings, those sentiments disappear. And they notice the absence of that very, very strongly. When we integrate our feelings into their solutions or into their problems and solution thought process, we are taking away their abilities to handle things on their own and handle things independently, and we are creating things that get a little bit too sticky for them. Again, with that difficult presentation, we come home, we're telling the family, we're just wanting some comfort. We just want to have a place to vent and talk about how awful the day was. And we want some reassurance. But then your kid breaks out crying and says, I can't believe you represented the family in that way, or I'm so disappointed in you, why did you do that? We'd be like, what? This was my day, this was my work, this was my presentation. Why are you having these types of feelings? It's the same message that when they have a problem or a situation happening and we insert our ideas and our feelings and our responses, that they too are not going to be willing to receive that. So, number 5, agency and choice in interactions and operations. That involvement is key. So the adolescent brain and even into the infant brain, we know highly benefits from structure and routine. We all know about like sleep training and making sure that our infants are able to regulate their clocks and their symptom and their desire for sleep and eating and being able to know what's coming next. As school-age kids approach, we start teaching them how to set alarms and that we need to get ready by a certain time and get into the car by a certain time. Routine and structure is incredibly necessary. We know that children that grow up in homes where there is less structure are often less successful in adulthood. We know that they have overactive limbic systems or emotions and nervous systems because their body doesn't know what to expect. And so it's trying to give them a range of emotions to be able to choose from at any point in time, which means they're kind of always on this ledge of I can dump into any emotion at any point in time, and that feels very stressful on the body. We know structure is important. We also know that for just a general household, we have things that need to get done. The trash needs to get taken out, the dishes need to get cleaned, the toys need to get picked up, whatever it may be. Things have to get done. And this is a way that we teach social belonging, and we teach purpose, and we teach that our teens can help us in these things. But we also know that the teen brain and the adult brain highly values agency and choice. We as adults know there's a big difference in being told to do something versus being asked to do something versus choosing to do something. If we are told to do something, we'll often approach that task with more resentment, lethargy, maybe it's going to go lower on the priority list. If we are asked to do something, we may feel a little bit more sense of pride. They chose me, they trust me, or I had an agency and choice in this, that I was able to say yes or no. I was able to say when this will or won't happen. And if we choose to do something, we're always going to be the most invested in that. It's going to be something that plays to our strengths, to our passions, to our interests, and we're going to be able to perform that task to the best of our ability. So when we are valuing structure and routine over agency and choice instead of in conjunction with those two, we throw off the little teeter-totter here, little seesaw. That our limbic systems, our nervous systems, need consistency to be able to predict what emotions are necessary at what point in time during the day. It helps all of our hormonal systems in our body and our brains, being able to regulate when we need to get ready for sleep, when we need to get ready for arousal and wake time, and whatever it may need to be. Similarly, the fully developed prefrontal cortex highly values control. We know as adults, some of us in this room are morning people. We like to get up and go. We want to get things done as quickly as possible because we like to rest later in the day. That's part of our prefrontal cortex, being able to decide when things do or don't happen. That's part of our executive functioning skills, to be able to recognize we need to pull the chicken out of the freezer in the morning so that it's thawed by the time I get home. So when we see that a teen is seeking control in the household, it is the development of an adulthood skill. This is something that should be celebrated. This is something that should be optimized. We should recognize that they are getting to a step in their life that they're leaving the stage of adolescence. They're leaving the stage of mom and dad just decide when everything is done and how it's done, and I don't need to have a choice. They're entering the stage of adulthood of I'm ready for some control and I'm ready for choice. So easy ways and small ways to be able to integrate that is thinking about and having conversations where their voice is heard on how and when chores will get done. Can they take out the trash at 10 o'clock at night as long as it doesn't make too much noise and wake anybody up? Sure, cool. Why does it have to be done at 4 o'clock in the afternoon? Is there a reason? Talking about when and how maybe their independent chores are done. So working with them on, hey, maybe not going to do your laundry as frequently. How about every single Friday is your day for laundry, but let me know if you need help. We give them agency and choice and control so that they can feel as active participants in the household just as you do too. I'm sure we can imagine if your teen was the one deciding every single thing in the household, you probably would not feel super comfortable in that house or in that space. Similarly, if you are deciding all of the things in every single thing, they also are not going to feel super comfortable in that space. It's all about the balance that we can create between the two of us and being able to close that gap of distance. So, everything I've shared thus far can be summed up into this slide here, that all behavior is information. We'll get to that second part in just a second. So, when we can remove the sting of behavior, when we can remove the personal attack that is perceived by behavior, and we can treat it as information, we open a different part of our brain. We shut down our emotional side, which we know many of us in this room have probably made a choice out of emotion that we regret, that we feel embarrassed by, that we were not super happy with, that if we thought, if I could have just been a little bit more calm in that situation, I probably would have handled it better. When we can remove the sting of the behavior that we are not super happy with, and we can treat it as just information of something to learn from, we activate a different part of our brain. We activate our ability to seek solution more effectively, to cooperate more easily, to make that individual feel like we are on a team and that we are working together. When we allow for curiosity to happen, why is it that there's so much silence? Why is it that you're rolling your eyes every time I say do X, Y, Z? Why is it that I feel so disconnected from you? When we open up curiosity and we remove the judgment from things, we allow for solutions to happen, because that's how our brains and our bodies are wired. So on that note of paying attention to behavior, that all behavior is information, including silence, that our teens are in a state where they are naturally and supposed to be learning as much information as they possibly can. The adolescence to teenage years is only a small fraction of your life. But by the time you turn 18, there's this kind of cultural expectation that you're gonna have to have it all figured out by then. And especially by the time you're, in college or mid-20s, that you better have it all figured out. But that's only a very, very small amount of time. When we think about exams or we think about a school schedule, we spend the vast majority of that semester learning and only a small percentage of that time being tested. But in our life, it's the opposite. We spend a very small amount of time learning and the vast majority of our life being tested. So when we can recognize that if there is a behavior that's happening, if there is silence that's happening, that we are uncertain about, if we can approach that with curiosity, it will always go better. If we can balance our nervous system, it will always go better. And lastly, that they are supposed to be learning. They are supposed to be trying. They are supposed to be making mistakes. They are supposed to be receiving guidance and support. And what they do not learn and share with us, they will learn from and share with another. It is our role to be able to be observant of those behaviors and to understand, is there an opportunity here for me to be that person that they are sharing with and learning from? Is there an opportunity that I'm missing out on? And if so, the best person to ask is that individual, is that teen. They'll give you the answers. They'll give you the playbook. I know they're very straightforward. I have so many conversations with them where that filter is gone. If you ask them to remove it, they will. And take that information as gently as possible. So, I have referenced a lot of my own personal experience and my clients and my students that I've chatted with. But I want to recognize that this community is not immune from those things. So this is some qualitative kind of feedback and data that was collected from some of the teens here at Trinity Presbyterian. So when asked the question, what they want their parents to know, these are some of the answers. They want y'all to know that they are doing their best, that they truly are. That the world that they are living in is different than the world than you were living in. It was different than the world that I was living in when I was a teenager. They really, truly are doing their best. They feel overwhelmed. There's a lot happening, and they're trying to balance it all. They want boundaries. As we mentioned, the kind of agency, choice, and control conversation, they want there to be structure and routine. They also want to have a voice in setting those as they are seeking their own control in their life. We get to model that with them. They value honesty, especially when parents are able to admit that they don't have all of the answers. They value the everyday simple moments, like small meals together, car rides, just hanging out, when there's not so much pressure in the day. They will receive pressure from every other space as soon as they walk out the door that morning. Our home can be a spot where that gets removed. They want to feel seen and understood as whole people, not just as students or kids. They wear a lot of hats. They fulfill a lot of roles. It's important that they receive recognition and validation and celebration for the many things that they are doing from the time they wake up to the time they go to sleep. They wish parents would trust them when they feel anxious, depressed, stressed, whatever it may be, and be in collaboration with them as they are seeking help in that, whatever that may look like. But they often feel like they can't share because the adults in their life may not be able to understand. This jumps all the way back to slide number 2, where we see lying becoming a learned behavior. That when the adults in their life maybe aren't showing that they understand in the way that the teen is hoping to see, we enable that lying. We know that when we are raising a little one, if we are setting the table for dinner and there's a toddler who's going to be eating with us, they're probably not going to get a full glass of water. They're going to get a little plastic sippy cup that's maybe half full. And as they get older, that cup will get the lid removed, and then it'll get a little bit more full, and then at some point they're going to be filling their own glass, and we don't have to do it for them. Those are the little baby steps. That relates to all of this in the way that if we are not valuing the little points in their life, if they are coming to us with the small challenges, and we are treating it like a big glass of water and not just like a small little baby step, we are not going to get access to the bigger things. If we are shutting down and inserting judgment and prioritizing our feelings when they bring the little things, the little small drama, we're not going to get access to the bigger things that we really want them to come to us with. We want them to come to us when they're struggling with peer pressure or substances or thoughts of self-harm or a big breakup or a change in a social group or a failing grade. We want them to come to us with the big things, so we have to value the little things. And they recognize that therapy and medication is not just for when you are in crisis. While it can be used in that way, it's often the least effective when it's used at a time in crisis versus when we are approaching that proactively instead of reactively. Teens here at Trinity Presbyterian recognize that there is so much pressure that it feels like there's always something more to be done, that they are feeling lonely in comparison to others, especially when online, that friends may feel like we have somewhat close relationships, but we're often very distant. They feel overwhelmed with the constant busyness. They have questions about their life that they don't know where to ask. There's fear of judgment. And that friendship and navigating conflict, expectations, and peer pressure is hard topics. It is our job to not dismiss those things because we know that is a stage of learning. They're longing for purpose. They want to feel like they matter and belong. This is a great opportunity for how we can insert some of those household responsibilities or family life responsibilities and really praise that when they do come through and when they do the thing on time and when they do the thing well. Being able to instill that peace and that feeling of confidence. We as adults enjoy that too. When we make a good dinner and the kid says, "That was awesome, thanks so much," or "I really like that, let's make that again sometime." We appreciate that, that feels good. Let's not withhold that from them. So everything I've shared today, every single bullet in this PowerPoint could really be an hour conversation. This is such a hard presentation to give because there's so many areas that I want to go down the rabbit hole. And so if you recognize that any of the bullet points that were shared today feel like they struck a chord with you, feel like I'm seeing that every single day with my teen, feel like, oh my gosh, I really gotta get working on that, know that that's a sign and that's an ask from your body and from your brain and from your nervous system to pay attention to that response. And I urge you to explore that with your teen and in a space that feels safe and comfortable. Maybe that's in therapy, maybe that's in a small group, maybe that's with family and friends. That looks different for everybody. But if you are seeking guidance, I always recommend checking in with a professional. And with that, I want to leave you with some resources in the back that at Hopeology Wellness, through the practice where I'm involved, we are a faith-based practice. We are happy to include that in the counseling that we provide, whether that's with the teens, families, or only with the parents. Sometimes it's just nice to have another adult that understands what you're going through and seeking some counsel and some support. And that's always an option that is out there. And so I hope that you explore those options, and I hope that this has brought up some really great points for discussion and learning and connection with the teens in your life. Thank you.
We do have time for questions. If anybody has anything they'd like to ask Meg, I will open the floor.
Meg, very informative, wonderful. You closed talking about therapy, and could you flesh out a little on where people should look for that? And one thing, you are LCSW, which is, I think, some sort of social worker. And through doing things with the church, I've learned there are a variety of social worker types. Could you kind of help the audience understand who's available out there for therapy and what social workers do and don't do?
Is this still, yeah, it's still working. So the origin of social work actually comes from within the church. That role was first seen as a church worker that helped individuals in the congregation find resources in the community that suited their needs. Maybe they were low on groceries or maybe need help with housing. That's really the origin of it, and we see that in some of the most common, I guess, views of social work in like the case management kind of side of things, where we are working with families in crisis and helping them find solutions for the things that they are managing. Clinical social work is the integration of that thought process of how our environment impacts our wellness, as well as the integration of clinical counseling skills and psychology, so coming together. So a traditional therapist, LPC, or APC at sometimes. So the primary teaching in that is how our bodies and brains kind of operate independently of the world. Social work really looks at a more holistic standpoint of how the world impacts us, how our social environments impact us, and being able to then use the understanding of how our bodies and brains work to then respond appropriately to our environment.
Thanks for your talk. It's very informative. So a lot of us in this room, I bet, are not dealing with teenage kids or adolescent kids, but we have our own children, and but now we have grandchildren, and they are approaching that. And so it's an interest. I mean, there's a lot of what you were saying here that applies to grandparents, but even with a more distant hand, and then having to work through allowing our children to be the adults. So I'm curious if you have any insights into that or experience.
Yes and no. I will say I would definitely kind of refer that to more of individuals that work with on the more adult side of things. But what you touched on is probably the number one thing that I would remember, or kind of encourage y'all to remember, is your lens of how you're looking at that situation is always going to be different than your child's lens of how they're looking at the situation. I see some head nods there. That you are seeing this from your own life experiences. You're seeing this from watching your child grow up and develop, and that you're seeing, your past parenting habits have either they are choosing to continue to embrace those or choosing to embrace something new. And sometimes that triggers our nervous system and inserts our emotions into feeling like, why aren't they choosing what I chose? And sometimes that can create a distance there. And so prioritizing your relationship with that adult child is probably the number one key into how to prioritize that relationship with that grandchild, because we know that we want this to be a collective unit. We want this to be a village. And if we are taking away the step of the parent and going directly into the role of grandparent to grandchild, that's going to cause some conflict there, and it's going to feel different than if we are approaching this as a family unit.
It applies to adolescents, obviously, and that are in our presumed control. But I have recently heard an approach that I'm an LPC, and that I thought was very helpful, because even in adulthood, I have friends that just want to take over, and it seemed very helpful to ask the person who is in crisis, do you want a hug? Do you want to be heard? Or do you want to help? And, and if somebody has jumped in and helped and, presumably solved the problem and taken credit for it, it's not a help. It's an annoyance.
Absolutely.
And but giving the adolescent or the adult the opportunity to say, no, this is what I need.
Yeah, to have that choice and that control in that situation is very important for anybody of all ages. Yeah. I think we are getting close to worship time.
Thank
Any
you.
other final questions?
Thanks, Meg.
Thank you.
Great.